On November 21st, 1992, Tom Monfils disappeared after a workplace dispute. A day later, his body was found in a pulp vat with a 50-pound weight wrapped around his neck. Over 30 years later, exactly who killed Monfils remains a mystery. Welcome to the Monfils 6 podcast. My name is Damon Schneider.
My name's Mike Piaskowski.
Tonight's episode will be meeting Mike Pi. So Dennis and John, the two authors of the Monfils Conspiracy, they met Mike Pi first on October 21st, 2001. So this, again, he was released in April. At this time in my life, I was 24 years old and living in Los Angeles. What were you up to at this time, Mike?
In October of 2001?
Yeah.
I was 10 years old in 5th grade.
So Dennis had been considering writing a book before he actually even met with Mike Pi, as he felt that there was a quote-unquote gaping hole in the Green Bay community. What do you think he meant by that?
I think he meant by the gaping hole that things were not fully resolved. I don't think that the community truly felt that the court case really fully represented the truth of what actually happened.
Yeah, it's interesting. You sent me some YouTube links recently of the Monfils 6 being released from prison, and I would watch through them. And it was interesting that some of the people in the videos kind of mentioned that now that these guys are walking around Green Bay, they might be stopped and harassed. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I actually hadn't really thought of how the community might react now to them being out. I don't know. I would think that, I would hope at least that people would view the fact that they've served their time, look at their history of being nonviolent people, the fact that it sounds like they were, I don't know if model prisoners would be the correct word, but certainly decent prisoners. They didn't cause problems. So I think the record shows that these are nonviolent, decent people. So if anybody did have an issue with them being out, they wouldn't be in the right to think that way.
Yeah, Keith Kutzka in particular, during his final parole, it was mentioned that one of the big aspects behind that was his record as a prisoner, that he was pretty much spotless throughout, which is kind of hard to believe considering the fact that, he may have been in prison all that time for something that he didn't do. So Mike Pi's family and friends, these years that he is locked up, so this is, again, October 28th, 1995 until April of 2001. They're working behind the scenes all this time to try to free him. And maybe this is one of the reasons why he got the early release and the others did not, was that he had this whole team acting as a machine, just trying to uncover everything that might possibly allow him to get another shot. They actually needed to raise an additional $300,000. Why was that?
Yeah, that's kind of always been something I've been a little shaky on as far as like the legal proceedings, because I know that they had put together the 300,000 the first time for the original trial, before the trial, I should say, and then they put it together again for the bail. I mean, I guess really they didn't have to get the money together. They got it together for his bail so he could be out and free while this is all pending. I mean, if they didn't have the money, he would have just kept sitting in jail, and then he would have been released eventually. So really they didn't have to get the money together, but they wanted him to be out, so they did get it together. But I don't fully know legally the whole systems, why they have to go through this. Do you know more?
From what I remember, they thought the severity of the crime justified an increase, that they sort of had to have this large bond be of $300,000 because of the nature of Monfils' death. Maybe people in the community would be in uproar if set to a small amount. So the second time around, a lot of these donations actually were just small donations across the Green Bay community that were coming in. And a lot of them actually were from former co-workers at the mill. And I think one of the points that was brought up was that, say someone retires, it's hard to get co-workers to put $5 or $10 into a retirement pot. But these were people that were putting thousands of dollars towards Mike Pye being released. What do you think about that?
I think it shows that they really believed in him. I mean, I would say there's a little bit of a difference between donating for retirement and donating to free someone who's they believe to be innocently imprisoned. I think there's a little more urgency there. But either way, I think it shows that they really believe in him. They believe that his character proves that he's not capable of something like this. And then, of course, I would imagine they knew the whole story behind it, as far as his lack of connection to any malfeasance as far as this supposed murder. What's remembered lives. Losing someone precious from our lives is the most painful event that one can endure. Seasons of Life Memorials is dedicated to making sure the person you lost is never forgotten. We work with you to help you craft a film about your loved one's life that can be viewed at the gravesite. We can also help you create a film about your very own life that can be viewed in the obituary section of your hometown newspaper. Imagine that, your friends, relatives, and neighbors viewing your own unique story and how your life truly did matter. Visit our website, seasonsoflifememorials.com, and follow us on social media today to start viewing what we can do for you.
So you bring up the issue of character. I wanted to get into this next point, in that Dennis, the author of the book, had worked with Mike Pye's father, Fran, at a Sears back in college. I think Sears is actually making a comeback, I heard, as far as coming back from sort of bankruptcy. So, yeah, Sears was basically a department store, in case you're listening to this and we're unsure of that. It was a big time store that a lot of people shopped at. It was kind of almost like Walmart before Walmart, but basically there was a Sears in every town that you would go to.
Well, and I'll add too, Damon, that not that this matters that much, but I have a fond connection to Sears, because when I taught driver's ed, that was where we had our classroom. It was inside of a Sears. So I have really good memories of Sears.
I think Sears, it's kind of a place where like everyone knows someone who worked at a Sears at some point, just because they were all over the
Yeah.
place. So hopefully they make their comeback. But one of the things that Dennis sort of thought when he met Fran was that no son of Fran could ever commit murder. What do you think that, in terms of him stating that, does that sort of taint the well as far as him being the author of this book?
No, I don't think so at all, because if that was his only connection to him, then perhaps, but it's clear that these authors have done a ton of research. And I think their connection to him is kind of what helped them get the book going, like their motivation to write about this. I think that connection fostered that. But as far as being objective, or the connection to Mike tainting their objectivity or lack of bias, I don't think that is involved at all. I think if they found evidence through their investigating that Mike maybe was involved, I think they would say that. But so I believe the character of these authors is very genuine as well. They really just want the truth.
That was my impression as well. I remember being in high school, and even in middle school, where oftentimes the teachers would ask about your parents, and I always kind of felt that they were sort of judging you by the character of who your parents were in the community. Did you get that where you went to school or not?
No, in fact, I'm a little confused on what you mean. What situation would they ask about your parents?
Oh, they would just. I remember an English teacher in high school who he knew the jobs of most of the students' parents in the class. Like there was one girl whose dad was a psychiatrist, and he would always mention, oh, so and so, I know your dad really well, and I felt as though that he was judging her based off who her father was in the community. But you didn't get any of that when you were in school?
No, I did not.
Well, maybe that's a sign of the generation.
Well, and it could be
of the generation.
It could be that maybe just the closeness of your community. Maybe I mean, you didn't grow up in that small of a town, but maybe it's more about that, just kind of the tightness of your community.
That's a good point. I grew up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which is smaller than Green Bay, about half the size of Green Bay, but similar in that it's sort of a blue-collar community, very much into the Packers, and so basically sort of a Green Bay light type of community. Mm-hmm. How was growing up in New Berlin?
Yeah, well, you were talking about elementary school before, right? With the English teacher?
That was high school. That was freshman year of high school.
Okay, so, I went to a private elementary school. Most of the kids were from New Berlin, but there were some just from around the community just to go to a private school. But then I went to a public high school, and it's a suburban community, so I don't know. I don't know if people were really all from New Berlin necessarily. I didn't get the same sense. I've never gotten the small town vibe that you might get in Oshkosh. I never really got that in New Berlin, because I've always felt that we're part of just the larger Milwaukee area.
That's interesting. But this brings me back to freshman year of high school, and that's the year that I first heard of the Monfils case, when I was standing in electronics class and it came over the radio. So the U.S. justice system, apparently, according to the authors, fails at about a rate of 5 to 10%. And at any given time, there are about 100,000 people in prison who are innocent. Did those statistics sort of shock you?
Yeah, they shocked me. I mean, I think I've watched my fair share of murder programs, so I've kind of heard stuff like that before about people being convicted and then oftentimes DNA evidence overturning it. So it certainly wasn't new like that there's innocent people who are convicted, but it is still unacceptable, really, that is happening.
10% in particular to me seems fairly unacceptable. What went wrong? What goes wrong in these cases oftentimes that innocent people are convicted?
I think it's a variety of things. I mean, sometimes it's just lack of DNA evidence, and therefore they rely on other things that could potentially just be wrong, like misleading or not misleading, but inaccurate eyewitness, just remembering something the wrong way. It just didn't go like that. Or in a lot of cases, I think there are definitely pressures on prosecutors to get a guilty verdict. And it was in this case, the Monfils case, where I think that was a factor, but I've definitely seen it in other cases too, where it just seems like they're not necessarily always looking to get down to the truth. They want to just get a guilty verdict and get somebody in prison to, I don't know, I guess maybe give the sense of justice to the community and the family of the victim. But unfortunately, I've seen it's not the only case, this Monfils one. I've seen other cases too where they've been wrong and it seems like they just want to give justice, but a lot of times they want to be swiftly giving justice and sacrificing accuracy with getting the right person.
Yeah, I'm thinking in particular of the case of the West Memphis 3. Are you familiar with that case at all?
I don't think so. When was that?
It was in the early 90s, West Memphis, Arkansas,
Yeah,
I believe.
yeah,
Three teen boys who sort of dressed in black and listened to sort of heavy metal music. There was a series of little young boys that were killed, and the police department basically, a lot similar to this case, they didn't have any leads as to who the killer could have been, and so sort of they blamed these sort of three kids that dressed in black and listened to rock and roll music or heavy metal music. Yeah. So yeah, very very similar, and they were released as well years later, much like in the Monfils case.
And were there witnesses who were saying that they were involved?
No, there were, as far as I remember, there were no direct eyewitnesses. No, a lot of it just came down to the police had no leads and they needed to charge someone.
Yeah,
and so they found someone to charge.
right.
So very similar to the Monfils 6. And now for a quick break. Memento mori. Remember, you must die someday. However, your life can be remembered forever by contacting us at seasonsoflifememorials.com. We are here to teach you how to create a film about your life that can be seen at your future gravesite, as well as within the obituary section of your very own newspaper. Contact us today at seasonsoflifememorials.com. Speaking of the obituary option, can you explain a little bit more about that, Mike, in terms of our business?
Sure. So the obituary option, we all know that the main way that people have communicated the death of somebody is through an obituary, and it was posted in the local newspaper. And that's still done today, I think, for the majority of deaths, but I think some are getting away from that. Well, this kind of puts a refreshing spin on that, where we still use the newspaper as a medium, but instead of the standard few paragraphs or whatever it's been, where you just write up kind of a little history of the person's life, we'd put in a QR code for the video, which can just give so many more layers to the standard newspaper obituary, where the QR code, of course, links to the video where you see more photos, not just the one that's usually in the paper. You'll see all these photos from the individual. You'll see much more background into their life story, more than you can fit into the standard 2 or 3 paragraphs or whatever you put in. And of course, the cost of obituaries nowadays, it depends on kind of the size of the portion of the paper you take out, but it depends on the paper too. But I mean, if you get any large city newspaper, it can run from $500, $1,000, sometimes even $2,000, depending on the paper. So this is definitely something different, where, it's saving some money, but also just completely revolutionizing the way obituaries are being done.
And we're back. So the authors state in the introduction of the book that Mike was framed by the Green Bay Police Department and the Brown County District Attorney's Office. Were you surprised that they would state that the Brown County District Attorney framed Mike Pye?
I thought it was a little strong, because to me, a framing means that they are like out to get somebody. And I don't know if they were necessarily out to get him. I think he was just happened to be standing in the way of the narrative they wanted to put forward. So I don't know if they really had anything against him personally. So I don't know if framing would be the right word, but I understand what they mean, that they kind of they were out to get the verdict that they wanted, and he was in the way of it, so they ran him over, frankly.
And certainly the fact that they tried all 6 people at the same time is unusual, and in that sense that you could, I think that the word frame probably is somewhat accurate, at least. The goal of the investigation, the authors claim, was to blame Kutzka, and basically Mike Pye would not lie about the fact that he was near Kutzka in the coop when Monfils went missing. Doesn't it all come down to this, to that fact that Mike Pye would have never been in prison had he sort of just thrown Keith under the bus?
Yeah, I think, again, if the police had and the prosecution had a theory that they were set with, and they wanted to go with it. And I think it shows that probably likely would have been the case, because we'll talk later about the whole Brian Kellner thing, how he went along with their narrative, and he ended up not getting charged. So I think if Mike had gone along with the police, he probably wouldn't have been in this situation.
We actually have a recording of Keith Kutzka talking about here not being treated fairly. Let's take a listen.
Myself and the other men are innocent men convicted by state-sponsored perjury, coerced by Detective Randy Winkler, and forced into the mouth of Brian Kellner through threats, threats and intimidation. That's fundamentally against the principles this country is founded on. There is no other evidence.
What are your thoughts on Keith's sort of attitude in this clip?
I think that I think this clip kind of just shows that he really wasn't going to change his story. He wasn't involved in this. He wasn't going to lie about what happened here. There really wasn't any knowledge that he had about what happened to Tom. What do you think?
Well, one thing we found out for sure is that Keith did not own a motorcycle. So when Tom called the police, when he was trying to get them to not give Keith the tape originally, Monfils had said that Keith was sort of in a motorcycle gang, or kind of implied it, and that he had a history of violence, and that was false too.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of interesting that the Winkler wouldn't have known that, the lead detective. So Winkler, according to Kutzka, tampered with police reports and intimidated witnesses. What were some of the ways that he intimidated witnesses?
Well, according to I remember the documentary, I believe there was an incident they discussed where he, and this is just one example, but he evidently questioned a minor without the presence of the guardian in her home. Do you remember that?
Yeah, he did, for at least an hour, possibly as long as 2 hours.
Yeah.
So the authors used the original police files to basically recreate a timeline that would show step by step where everyone was in the plant at the exact moment that Monfils disappeared. How do you think they did in terms of their timeline, putting that together?
I thought they did a great job. I think it's probably the most thorough timeline that exists for this case. I don't think the police put something like this together.
I don't either. If they did, it was not nearly of the quality that the authors of the book did. They also interviewed more than 50 people, which for someone who's done documentaries before, 50 interviews is a lot of people. Why do you think that so many people were willing to go on and be interviewed for this?
Well, I think there could be a couple reasons. One could be relating to that lack of resolution we talked about at the beginning of this episode, where, I mean, these people all still live in the Green Bay area, and I think they want it solved too. They want it done. And then another motivation for cooperating or speaking with the authors would be that they believe in their innocence of all of these people. And they know them, they worked with them, or if they're family with them. So they really do believe that they are innocent.
One of the last points in the introduction was that John Sikowski, the DA, was really open to working with the authors, but the Green Bay Police Department was very much not. What do you think the reason for that might have been?
I thought that the reason Zukowski was very open with it is because I've always felt that he believes that everything was done correctly here. He stands by firmly the results of the trial. And he always has, and I think he always will till the day he dies. I don't think he'll ever admit that anything was done questionably. And then as far as the police not cooperating, I think that goes back to the whole tape issue. They are still embarrassed, I guess you could say, humiliated about that incompetence that was shown, that they don't want to have anything to do with this anymore. They just want it to be done and over. And I think that, again, it shows how responsible they were if they had to pay $2.1 million to the Monfils family because of that tape getting released.
New episodes of the Monfils 6 podcast drop every other Friday. Please join us again. Thanks for listening.
Have you recently lost a loved one and want to hold on to their memory forever? Would you like all of the world to view what their life had been about? Seasons of Life Memorials is what you are looking for. We create individual and unique documentary shorts that will allow anyone visiting the gravesite to view the documentary and your memories of the loved one. Contact us today to set up an appointment at seasonsoflifememorials.com.